Pleasure to welcome you to the World War II Memorial. The memorial that commemorates the generation of Americans who emerged from the Depression to fight and win the most devastating war in world history. On this Memorial Day, we gather to remember those who, in the words of Abraham Lincoln, gave the last full measure of devotion to their country. Here at the World War II Memorial, the more than 400,000 men and women who never made it home are represented by the field of gold stars on the Freedom Wall behind me. Each star, each one of the 4,048 stars, symbolizes 100 individual Americans who paid the price of freedom. I extend a very special welcome to our distinguished guests, the World War II veterans, their families and friends, and to all of you who've traveled from near and far to be here today. For this Memorial Day ceremony, we are honored to be joined by Congresswoman Marcy Kaptur, who authored the bill that created this magnificent memorial and continues to be its champion. We are grateful for your ongoing support of the World War II Memorial and the veterans who represent it. I would also like to express my appreciation to the United States Army Brass Quintet for the music provided this morning, to Chaplain Wolf, and to Administrator Kevin Tokarski of the U.S. Maritime Administration. Thank you for being here today and your support of the veterans that this memorial honors. I would also like to recognize the friends of the National World War II Memorial, Mr. Josiah Bunting and his team, who are partners in the care of this memorial and co-sponsor of this morning's ceremony. We thank you for your partnership. We share in your mission to ensure that the legacy and sacrifices of the World War II veterans are not forgotten. And to the National Park Service staff who interpret and maintain this magnificent memorial, as well as our amazing volunteers who help educate the more than 4 million people who come here each year. Thank you very much. All of the monuments and memorials along the National Mall promote the spirit of unity and remembrance, giving all of us a way to recognize those who have served and those who continue to serve our great nation. They remind all Americans of our common heritage and our way of ensuring that fallen heroes and their deeds are not forgotten. We are here today to specifically remember and honor all the World War II veterans, their families, and the families of those who didn't return. We honor them for their dedicated and valuable service. In closing, let us not forget the words of President Harry Truman, inscribed on this very memorial. Our debt to the heroic men and valiant women in the service of our country can never be repaid. They have earned our undying gratitude. America will never forget their sacrifices. Thank you.
So I was kind of a history geek growing up, and I figured it's a good time to share some of that knowledge now because I think it's relevant. 1937, George Marshall was sworn in as the Army General of the Armies. Same day that he was sworn in was the same day that Adolf Hitler was invading Poland. And George Marshall said that he thinks there's a threat looming, and at that time the United States only had a few 100,000 men in the military. George Marshall said, with that threat looming, we need to do something about our military, and fast. By the end of World War II, our military was in the millions. And the effort that went into putting that military out on the battlefield, not only to victory, because had we lost World War II, make no mistake, we wouldn't be sitting here enjoying a day like this. We'd be speaking German or Japanese, and this would be gone. The United States would have lost everything. It was an all or nothing venture that went into World War II. George Marshall understood that, built up the military, and sent off millions to fight. Behind me is a representative of 400+ thousand that did not make it home. And these are young men and women that went off to fight. At that time it was mostly men, but the women played a big role in a lot of roles that really didn't get a lot of credit then, but now is starting to get credit now. And you'll notice The columns don't just stand for the military that didn't make it home, but there are names inscribed here, Rosie the Riveter and others, civilians that played an active role in making sure that this country not only stayed in the fight, but won that fight. And at the end of World War II, when you add up all the dead from all the nations that took part, the total losses, and I tell this to friends who aren't really up on history, and they always just get that bewildered, faraway look when I say the number. I always ask them, I said, how many people do you think were killed during World War II for all the countries that were involved? And they'll throw out a few million, 10 million. At the end of the day, between 74 and 78 million people were killed during World War II. And the reason I give that history preface is because you think to yourself, when you come here to this mall filled with memorials and monuments, why wasn't there a World War II memorial? And that was a question that our keynote speaker got asked, out of all things, a fish fry. I swear to you, the congresswoman was at a fish fry, and a gruff World War II vet yelled at her, "Hey,
he never lost it.
Why isn't there a World War II memorial?" And that's a great question, because at that time there wasn't. And she pointed out, well, there's Iwo Jima, which if there's any Marines in the group, we got Marines out here? How do you designate when you know there's a Marine in the crowd? There you go. Which is different from the Army. My friends over here, Pershing Zone, how do you say in the Army? See, it's hooah and hoorah. Those kids could never get together to figure that out. They're off by like one syllable. But she thought Iwo Jima was the memorial. But that was for the Marines for one battle during World War II. So she said, you know what? That's a great idea. Let's build a World War II memorial to memorialize all those who went off to battle and never came home to their families. It wasn't just one time that she introduced this legislation. It was a number of times. When we say act of Congress, this was more of an act of God, because it was introduced 3 different times, 5 years from the minute she said, I'd like to introduce a World War II memorial, until it got approved. And then it was still another, 10 years before it actually was put together, as you see here. And it wasn't just her when the building started. Steven Spielberg was active. Steven Spielberg's Tom Hanks, remember he had Saving Private Ryan, the movie came out, which got renewed interest in the whole idea of World War II. Walmart was involved, FedEx was involved. There were dozens of people, big sponsors that put up a lot of money to help build this memorial behind me. And friends, by the way, friends of the World War II Memorial now, they're currently in the midst of a 4-year World War II 75th anniversary commemoration. It began on the 75th anniversary of the attack of Pearl Harbor. It's going to continue through the 75th anniversary of VJ Day, which is in 2020. So we're going to have a lot of these ceremonies out here on the memorial. And Friends of the Memorial is the only organization marking nearly every battle in which American troops participated during World War II here at the World War II Memorial. We're going to create the next greatest generation of Americans through community service and their programs. And before I introduce our keynote speaker, we have a representative from Friends of the World War II Memorial. I want to bring him up. It's Mr. Josiah Bunting III. He's the chairman of the board of the Friends of the National World War II Memorial, an author, an educator, and a veteran. Please welcome Mr. Josiah Bunting.
Congresswoman, God bless you and thank you. Oh, beautiful for heroes proved in liberating strife, who more than self our country loved, and mercy more than life. A beautiful line. Most Americans don't know most of the lines of our great national hymns, but that's my favorite. Who more than self our country loved, and mercy more than life. It is important to remember that while the 75th anniversary of the greatest generation who fought in our behalf in Europe and the Pacific is now with us, we are honoring today Americans who paid the supreme sacrifice in all of our wars, formerly called Decoration Day, but we think, and I think most of you must note, that we are conducting these ceremonies almost at the midpoint between the Washington Monument and the Lincoln Memorial. The founder and establisher of our country and its greatest savior. And I particularly am appreciative of occasions like this.
Welcome back, everyone. Here to news now. We're taking in some of the sights and sounds from the World War II Memorial as we are remembering those 400,000 Americans who did not come home and paid the ultimate sacrifice for our country during World War II. Let's continue to listen in to this very moving memorial.
Refreshes in our memory and our own convictions to emulate them. God bless America. We are honored, all of us, to be on this hallowed ground. Thank you.
We have a special privilege today of having the United States Army Brass Quintet. These folks over here, these good, well-dressed men over here, 5 of them. It sounds like there's like 30 of you guys, by the way, when you play. And if you're not familiar with Pershing Zone, which they're the smaller group of Pershing Zone, this is 200, what are you guys, 260, about 260 musical ambassadors that travel the world. Wherever there's a flag raising on a new consulate, representatives of Pershing Zone go. And if you've never heard them play before, they're amazing. So that's why we brought these guys out. They're going to go ahead and play for you right now. Thank you, gentlemen. All right, this is where we're going to do exercise. When you clap your hands, it gets circulation going through your body. Did you know that? Okay. We're going to clap really loud. I'm going to introduce to you some of the heroes of today, some World War II veterans who've joined us today. I'm going to give you their name, read you where they were attached and what they did, and then that's your cue to go bananas. Are you good with this? I didn't hear. You guys good with that? Well, all right. I just want to make sure this thing was on. All right, here we go. Where's Holly? Holly. Well, let's try this. Is Mr. Harold Radish here? All I need you to do is either wave or stand up. Is Harold, did he make it with us today? There you go. Harold was drafted in 1943, sent to France with the 90th Infantry Division, fought in the Ardennes, was at the Battle of the Bulge. In February 45, near the Siegfried Line, he was taken prisoner of war by Germans. Harold, being Jewish, got rid of his dog tags before being captured. He was freed by the English soldiers in 1945. Mr. Harold Radish. All right, that's a pretty good warm-up, but I do think you can get louder. Here we go. Mr. Carmel Wetzel, he was drafted to the Army's 104th Infantry, 3rd Battalion, 26th Yankee Division. He drove on the Red Ball Express on a mission to Robilat, France, near Metz, Germany, was captured by the German army, spent a little more than 6 months in Stalag 12 and Stalag 2 in a work group on a German Air Force base in Germany. He was liberated by the Russians at the end of the war. Mr. Carmel Wetzel. Timberwolves, yep. Mr. Lou Perrone. That's all right, you can just wave if you want to. You can wave, that a boy. Lou Perrone served as a ball turret gunner on a B-17 Flying Fortress from 43 to 45. He flew 32 missions with the 533rd Bomb Squadron. He's the only living member of his 10-man crew who flew missions over Germany during World War II as a part of the 8th Air Force. He currently lives in Edgewater, Maryland. Mr. Lou Perrone. Colonel Jimmy Rife, serving with the U.S. Army 27th Infantry Division during World War II, leading a platoon in the invasion of Okinawa in 45. Spent 30 years with the Army, including service as Chief of Staff of the 82nd Airborne Division. That's a pretty tough bunch. He currently lives in Gainesville, Virginia. Colonel Jimmy Rife. Please, get loud. We love that. Here we go. Mr. Herman Zaitchek. He stormed Utah Beach at H hour on D-Day with the Army's 4th Infantry Division. He fought in the Battle of the Bulge. He helped liberate Paris, and he helped liberate Dachau, one of the camps. Mr. Herman Zaitchek. Mr. Andrew Abugalis, enlisted in the Navy in 42, was assigned to the crew of the aircraft carrier USS Yorktown, serving in the Pacific, taking part in 43 attacks on Marcus, Wake, and Gilbert Islands, and supported the invasion force at Gilbert Island in 44, the attacks on Marshall Islands, and supported the invasion force at Marshall Island. He says his many memorable days consisted of serving on the greatest ship in the U.S. Navy with the finest officers and sailor. Mr. Andrew Abugalis. Lieutenant Colonel William Benelli joined the Army Air Corps in 1940. By the way, the Army Air Corps predates the Air Force, just so you know. 1940. You look good, sir. I know, right? He was shipped off to Hawaii, where he trained as an aircraft mechanic. He survived the attacks on Pearl Harbor in 41, returned to the U.S. to train as a B-17 pilot. In 44, he was sent to Foggia, Italy, and he piloted 30 sorties, missions, over Axis territories. He earned many decorations, was promoted to the rank of captain. Lieutenant Colonel William Benelli.
Why are you playing a game?
Mr. Joseph Ryan, where are you, sir? He served with the United States Army Signal Corps, 9th Infantry in the European Theater. Mr. Joseph Ryan.
Where you at?
Peter Naylor? Did Peter Naylor make it with us today? Sir, good to see you. Wait a second. Hold the phone. Thought you were Harold, my bad. Peter Naylor enlisted in the Army Air Force as an aviation cadet in December 43 and trained to be a B-29 flight engineer. He was scheduled for deployment to the Pacific Theater when the war ended. Mr. Naylor used the GI Bill to earn an engineering degree, was employed to the Department of the Navy, and had assignments in Vietnam and South Korea. Mr. Peter Naylor.
Yeah.
Where that charger at?
Why not?
Mr. Kenneth Oakes. There you are, sir. Enlisted in the U.S. Navy in 1944. He was 17 years old. Lied about your age, didn't you? Attaboy. He was assigned to the USS Ticonderoga as a 20mm gunner, as coxsman 3rd class, and after the war he joined the Navy Reserves, and then the Army Reserves. Couldn't make up your mind, huh? Army, Navy, right? Good to see you, sir. Thank you for being here.
You still playing?
Mr. Callan Francis Seffel enlisted in the United States Navy in 1942 at the age of 17. Another guy who fudged his age. I see how it works. He attained the rank of electrician's mate first class, stationed in the Pacific, where he was responsible for degaussing wooden-hulled minesweepers in hopes of preventing magnetic mines from detonating. Mr. Callan Francis Seffel. Mr. Harry Miller. He's a veteran of World War II, Korea, and Vietnam. He served in the U.S. Army during World War II, taking part in the Battle of Bulge. He also served in the Army in Korea and with the Air Force during Vietnam. Mr. Harry Miller. And Mr. George Arnstein. He served in the United States Army in the European Theater. Mr. George Arnstein. How about one more really loud, crazy round of applause for these veterans? It's so great having them here with us. All right, back to that story about that fish fry. Let's start with Congresswoman Marcy Kaptur. She's a United States representative for the Ohio's 9th Congressional District, currently serving her 19th term in the House. Congresswoman Kaptur is the longest-serving woman in the House. She's also currently the longest-serving woman in Congress and the second longest-serving woman ever. So she's got that going for her. So the meeting at the fish fry took place, and then in 1987, she first introduced legislation to try and get a World War II memorial built. And that didn't go anywhere. She introduced it again in 88, or 89, I should say. That didn't go anywhere. She introduced it again in 91. She introduced legislation for the fourth time in 1993. Fourth time's always the charm, isn't it? This time the legislation passed. President Bill Clinton signed the legislation into law, and finally the National World War II Memorial was dedicated. Well, it was signed into law back in 93, but then 2004, you do the math, it was finally, hey, we have a duck, look at this. In 2004, it was finally dedicated. It's 15 years after the fact this memorial finally went up. And I don't know about you, but being where it is right here in the mall, I think it's probably one of the nicest and finest memorials I've ever seen. And I've seen a few around the world. This is beautiful. 5 years ago, during a special celebration marking the 10th anniversary of the memorial's dedication, the Friends of the National World War II Memorial, the founder, Ambassador Hayden Williams, who also led the site selection and design efforts for the memorial, wrote of Congresswoman Kaptur, quote, "She has often been called, figuratively speaking, the mother of the World War II Memorial. She deserves the accolade. It was Marcy Kaptur who played the critical role in moving the World War II memorial legislation through Congress with great skill and persistence. Congresswoman Kaptur has remained the memorial's strongest champion on the Hill during the location and design approval battles." That's half the battle, too. 5 years to get it finally adopted, and then came, well, where are we going to put it? What's it going to look like? And that went on forever, which is ridiculous. Her strong and passionate voice was heard at one hearing after another. Her deep devotion to the veterans of World War II is legendary. In many ways, Marcy Kaptur's name is synonymous and will always be associated with the World War II Memorial. It is my great honor and privilege to introduce to you the mother of World War II Memorial, Congresswoman Marcy Kaptur.
Greetings. Thank you so very much, Jonathan, and to all those who have gathered here today, most notably every single World War II veteran who made the effort to be with us here. God bless you. God bless America. Thank you for giving us the America that we know. May I offer a very happy Memorial Day greeting in this year of 2019. Chairman Bunting, thank you so very much for all you have done with the Friends of the Memorial to lead us to this place today. Here we are, a free people. Today we unite to revere, to remember, and to render tribute to the millions of our fellow citizens who have made the ultimate sacrifice for an ideal. The ideal of liberty for all people, for all of us, and for our progeny. Now, liberty and freedom hold distinctly different meanings. Freedom is the condition of being free, not under the control of another. But liberty is the deeper condition of having been freed from an oppression, a dictatorial regime, or starvation, or poverty, or disease, or forced evacuation, or war. Those who have been liberated have overcome some form of human debasement or degradation. America's very being was created to liberate people, to liberate people. And so today most of our citizenry has been born into freedom.
And more ceremonies to continue next.
That's why I said I'm a different nigga, bro. I'm in a different situation. Yo, if this nigga join my party again, bro, he annoying as fuck. That SH Gamer Boy, bro. That nigga always joining my party like I be talking to him. Yeah, like I know this nigga. Yo, nigga joined early, I was just sitting here like, yo, what's good? I'm like, what the fuck? Yeah, bruh. Yeah. You got a mic? I can say shit. Nigga said, okay. It did what? I'm like, alright. Yeah, he left. Yo, I just marked some a half and some minutes right there too for you. Bless. What you got though? I got a shotgun for you. There you go. There you go. Let's answer them questions. Useful. You got that useful. It's inside the what you call it, the stadium. You know what I'm saying? I got it ready to go.
I'm lost. I gotta pee.
Useful. People plotting out a pistol.
Followed by a master's degree from the National War College. Admiral Moran is a naval aviator flying the P-3 Orion, which is a surveillance aircraft that he used, among other things, to track Russian submarines. He also served on carrier and on the staff of the U.S. Indo-Pacific Command. Ashore, he has served as the CNO's Director of Air Warfare and Chief of Naval Personnel, as well as his current billet as the Vice Chief of Naval Operations. He is, for those of you who don't know this, universally regarded as one of the most imaginative and accomplished officers in our entire military. This Memorial Day is a special one for us on Intrepid. As we approach the 75th anniversary of D-Day, us as New Yorkers to hold this pier for the commissioning of the ship. New York, of course, is built in part with steel salvaged from the World Trade Center after the September 11th attacks, actually built with that steel. On our way to her commissioning, 10 years ago, she sailed by the World Trade Center for the first time and gave the site a 21-gun salute. How fitting on this Memorial Day that New York is once again back to her home and passed by on our way here the newly rebuilt World Trade Center that she now takes such an important part in protecting. Our Memorial Day ceremony involves remembrancers, sailors, Marines, airmen, Coast Guardsmen and women who have given their lives so we may be free. We have had a tradition on Memorial Day of speakers from all branches of the military. Obviously, being on board Intrepid with New York alongside of us, it is particularly powerful to have the next leader of the United States Navy as our speaker this year to lead us in our remembrance. It's with the greatest honor and respect that I present to you the next Chief of Naval Operations, Admiral Bill Moran.
Thank you, Mel, for a very kind introduction. Probably over the top just a bit, but that's what you get in New York, isn't it? But make no mistake, the honor is all mine to be able to participate today along the banks of the Hudson River with a great active duty ship on one side and this historic museum and warship on the other side. So welcome to everyone here, and good morning. Thanks for joining us. On behalf of the extraordinary men and women of the United States Navy and all who wear the cloth of our nation, thank you for sharing Memorial Day with us today. Special thanks to Susan and the Intrepid Museum, all the organizers and volunteers, the thousands of organizers and volunteers for New York Fleet Week. I tell you what, Mayor, it just doesn't get any better than this for sailors and Marines who are with us today off the New York and other parts of the Navy. So thank you to all of you who have put this show together for the last week. Mayor de Blasio, Commissioner Sutton, and our foreign allies and partners who are here today, thanks for joining us. And finally, and most especially, for all of our veterans and our active duty military. If you're a veteran or active duty, please stand and be recognized on this beautiful day. Now, this week, as I said, has demonstrated once again that New York is a Navy town. And to be able to close out Fleet Week at the site of America's most cherished warships, the USS Intrepid, is indeed very special for me. And as a fellow upstater and New Yorker, I could not be more proud to play just a small role in bringing together this wonderful, patriotic city in our great Navy. New York has a special place in all of our hearts. And if you've been lucky enough to wear your whites in Times Square, or march down through Brooklyn in a parade, or be thanked for your service by New York's finest, there is no doubt New York City is the Navy's hometown. The character of this city, with its own brand of fortitude, resiliency, and grit, matches the character of the ship that we're standing next to and the American service members we honor here today on Memorial Day. Today is a solemn occasion as we pause to remember those who made the ultimate sacrifice, those who, as President Lincoln said at Gettysburg, gave their last full measure of devotion. Countless generations, heroes that served as guardians of our freedom and our way of life. We are the beneficiary of their sacrifices, and we celebrate the gift that they bestowed upon us. And we stand on their shoulders, and for those of us on active duty, we stand the watch for them. Our pledge here today and every day is to preserve, uphold, and defend their legacy, so that future generations can stand here as we do with the same liberties and freedoms. on the shores of this great nation and in the shadow of a great city. For many of those heroes, New York City, with its world-famous skyline, the Statue of Liberty in the background, these were their last sights before they set sail for unfamiliar and dangerous places. Bella Wood, Normandy, Chosin, Khe Sanh, Fallujah, Kabul. Places where they defended democracy against those who would seek to do us harm. Where they placed the values of America above their own comfort, their own gain, or even their own lives. These extraordinary heroes share the same sense of purpose that beats in the heart of every American and every New Yorker, especially those who were here on 9/11. Firemen, policemen, and everyday but extraordinary citizens of New York who ran towards danger, not from it. Those New Yorkers inspired a nation on that day, and they inspired many of us wearing a uniform. They inspired sailors like Senior Chief Petty Officer Shannon Kent, who gave her last full measure of devotion in Syria earlier this year. Shannon was a New Yorker, and when you hear her story or look at the images of her in tactical gear in a combat zone with her Yankees cap on, you'd be proud to claim her as one of your own. Like so many New Yorkers, Shannon came from a family rich with tradition of selfless service. Her father, a New York State policeman. Her uncle, a New York City firefighter. Both were first responders on 9/11. And her husband, Joe, recently retired from the Army after a long and distinguished career. And her brother, a United States Marine, still on active duty. Like so many New Yorkers, Shannon wanted to make it big. Not just in this city, but in your Navy and in our world. In the true spirit of a New Yorker, she had the grit and determination to be the very best at whatever she did. She joined an elite community in the Navy, deployed to the most dangerous regions in the world, because Shannon was a warrior. She was also a dedicated mother and wife. And while it is important to remember Shannon, it is just as important to remember what she was willing to give her life for. For us, for each other, and for freedom from tyrants, terrorists, and those who seek to replace a free system with an autocratic one. This is the legacy left to us by heroes like Shannon and the sailors who once fought on the decks of Intrepid. That same call to service, that same drive to push the boundaries forward, and that same resolve to make the world a better place. None of us know the challenges of our country and the challenges it will face tomorrow, except for one, and that is challenges will certainly come our way. None of us know the depths of sacrifice that, ladies and gentlemen, is the sound of freedom. Navy helicopters. None of us know the depths of the sacrifice that this generation and future generations may be called upon to make, but we do know that the fighting spirit of all Americans willing to give their last full measure of devotion remains just as strong with this generation. It lives on in the very heart of every sailor and American called to a life of service. They serve today with a sense of purpose and determination, honoring the spirit of those we memorialize on this day. And I have to believe that the heroic sacrifices of Americans like Shannon Kent is never lost. That the character of women and men who serve today and in the future is inspired by what others have done and represents what's best about the Navy, about New York City, and about this great nation. Please leave here today knowing that it is so important to honor those who gave their lives for this country. Because gratitude, publicly, and strongly professed is the great motivator for fearless warriors in our armed services. And because the faith that Americans have in all of us in uniform serves to provide stability throughout the globe. So God bless this great city. God bless this great land we call America. And bless all of those who gave their life in service to their nation. Thank you very much.
Sir, thank you so much for your incredibly meaningful and inspirational and important words for all of us. Ladies and gentlemen, I am honored to introduce the co-chairman of the Intrepid Museum. He is currently chairman of global brokerage of Cushman & Wakefield, and prior had served as Cushman & Wakefield's president and CEO from 2005 to 2010. He's a passionate champion of the Intrepid Museum, and he cares deeply about the well-being of military personnel and their families. He helped found Cushman & Wakefield's own veterans hiring platform, known as the C&W Veterans Initiative Program, on which he serves as chairman. He's a member of the board of Team Rubicon, the Navy SEAL Foundation, and the Syracuse University Institute for Veterans and Military Families. He also served as chairman of the Business Executives for National Security from 2007 to 11, and currently still serves on its executive board among countless other civic and charitable organizations. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Bruce Mosler.
Thank you, Susan, for that very kind introduction, and for all that you and the entire Intrepid team do to make this a world-class institution. Admiral Moran, go ahead. Admiral Moran, thank you very much for joining us on this most important day to recognize those who have made the ultimate sacrifice in service for our freedom. And as Susan said, we appreciate your most important and thoughtful words. Mel, my fellow trustee and great friend, as always, it is great to see you here on this solemn occasion. I also want to take a moment to thank the Board of Trustees, all of them, especially my co-chairman, Ken Fisher, and the entire Fisher family for all that they do for our men and women in uniform. Ladies and gentlemen, we gather here on a solemn occasion, a day that our nation sets aside to remember those who have given their all. We would do well to remember the poignant words of President James A. Garfield at the first commemoration of Memorial Day on May 30th, 1868, when he said, "We do not know one promise these men made, one pledge they gave, one word they spoke, but we do know they summed up and perfected by one supreme act the highest virtues of men and citizens. For love of country they accepted death, and thus resolved all doubts, and made immortal their patriotism and their virtue." It is fitting that we're here at Intrepid to honor their memory, for Intrepid is indeed hallowed ground. Famous for her rich history of service to our country, she carried men and munitions in World War II, Vietnam, and the Cold War. She knew battle, danger, attacks, and certainly loss of life. But she also knew incredible acts of heroism by her crew, and thus ultimate victory. As you've heard, more than 250 of her sailors gave their lives on this ship and in her aircraft. Intrepid, therefore, is symbolic in that she is a constant reminder that freedom is not for free. It comes with a heavy cost and requires great courage and extraordinary sacrifice. So I'm going to do this again. I'd like to ask our Intrepid crew and all those who have and are currently serving in our military to please stand up once more and be recognized. Thank you. Thank you for all that you do. Thank you on behalf of a grateful nation and all of our Intrepid trustees. Ladies and gentlemen, this year is Intrepid's 76th year of service to this great nation. And from that day to now, Intrepid continues to honor our heroes' sacrifice by reminding our youth of the heavy price that the nearly 1% who wear the uniform must pay to maintain our cherished freedoms. 24 hours, 7 days a week, more than 170,000 of our military men and women are forward deployed right now around the world in harm's way and are prepared to lay down their lives in defense of those freedoms. They are the thin line protecting the future that we want for our children from a present that could snatch away what we often, too often, take for granted. I'm going to let that win the day for the moment. We remember on this day that their service has very high costs, for which we as a nation are eternally grateful. So in their honor, I urge you today to please take nothing for granted and pause with me to mark a special moment on behalf of those who keep our country safe. Ladies and gentlemen, because we know our national security carries a cost, we must be vigilant and clear-minded in assessing our standing around the world. We as a country are at a serious inflection point in world affairs. The choices our nation makes at this time will determine the direction that we take and thus the impact on many generations to come. The world requires and wants the leadership of the United States. And leadership is insisting that Iran stop funding terrorism and that it ceases the pursuit of nuclear capability. We should also be clear-minded in knowing that Iran seeks to grow its military initiatives and more broadly, its influence in the region. Leadership is also sending Russia and China a message of strength in the face of territorial aggression in the Ukraine, or saber-rattling in the South China Sea and beyond, not to mention Venezuela, where Russia has recently committed to boots on the ground. And Korea? Korea remains the great unknown, so we must remind its leader that denuclearization and total disarmament must be the only path to re-entering the global economic village. And in the final analysis, the world looks to us because we are founded on the proposition of freedom. On this day, here in the city that's home to the Statue of Liberty, where terrorists struck on 9/11, a day that we shall never forget, we must commit to holding firm to our nation's ideals, defending our friends, and promoting peace, as well as democratic values. That is the work of our intrepid museum. It is our staff and trustees' responsibility to carry out the mission of recognizing and honoring those who are prepared to pay the highest price for our freedoms. They educate, inspire, and pass on to the next generation responsibility that has motivated all whom have served on this ship. It is now my privilege to introduce the leader of our great city, Mayor Bill de Blasio. He's no stranger. Go ahead, please. He is no stranger to the cost of service, as his father served in the Army in the Pacific Theater in World War II. The mayor is committed to continuing his life's work of building a stronger city known for opportunities to all, while continuing his ongoing commitment to serving a city that cares deeply about its veterans. One great step in that effort being the appointment of retired Army Brigadier General Lori Sutton as Commissioner of Veterans Affairs. Commissioner, thank you as always for joining us on this most important day. And now, without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, the 109th mayor of our great city, Bill de Blasio.
Bruce, thank you for all your commitment to all those who serve, to all our veterans, to this extraordinary museum. Thank you. Let's thank Bruce for all he does. Now, Admiral said powerful things, but he said something very provocative too. He said we in New York City are over the top sometimes. So I want to know, this Fleet Week, did we go over the top and make you welcome? Well, we wanted to go over the top for the members of our sea services, and we wanted to show the love and the warmth and the caring of this city for our men and women who serve. And we wanted you to know how much we appreciate you. So I have heard so many wonderful stories of men and women in uniform walking down the streets of our city and being surrounded by a crowd who wanted those selfies. who wanted to invite you into their restaurant, who wanted to give you their advice. New Yorkers like to give advice. Did you notice that? Well, we just want to say thank you to all those who serve us. And Fleet Week is a chance to do that, a chance to pour out our love in a very special way. And a few days ago, I had the honor of touring the USS New York. And I want to say to all the men and women who serve on the New York, they have honored this city. They have honored those who lost their lives on 9/11 and all those who served on 9/11 in the rescue and recovery. If you go through that ship, it is not only a key element of our Navy protecting us, it's also a living memorial to everyone who on that grave day gave their all and gave their lives. Let's just salute everyone from the USS New York and thank them. The Intrepid serves as an extraordinary reminder. The story of this ship, it constantly reminds you when we're fighting for freedom and fighting for what's right, we don't give up. This ship took many hits, but the sailors and the Marines on the Intrepid never ever gave up. And we honor and thank all of you. And to everyone who has made sure that this museum is here for all of us, to Bruce and to Mel, to Susan, you've done something extraordinary. People from this city, but from all over this country, come to this place to remember and to be recharged in our commitment to our nation. I also want to say on behalf of all New Yorkers that when we created our Department for Veteran Services and we looked for a leader, we not only found a leader, we found someone with, I have to say, superhuman energy. And anyone who has worked with Commissioner Lori Sutton will agree with that statement. Lori, thank you for all you do for our veterans. Admiral Moran, I want to just say, we could tell in the brief remarks you gave that our Navy will be in very, very good hands. Thank you for your leadership. And Commodore Benton, we welcome you, and we welcome and respect the alliance. All of the members of the armed forces of our allied nations who are here, let's salute them, let's thank them for being shoulder to shoulder with us. And finally, on behalf of all New Yorkers, I always say I represent 8.6 million highly opinionated people. But there's something I think New Yorkers can agree on across the board. And I want to thank you, Lieutenant McCain, for what you do for our nation. But Lieutenant, I have to say, we also miss your dad so much. We miss his voice of conscience. So today is a day to remember, but we have to remember with all our hearts. We'd never want Memorial Day to be something that people just see as a date on the calendar and they just think of it as another holiday. It's great that families get together. It's great that there are barbecues. It's great that people get to go to the beach. But let's remember why this day is here. This day is to remember our fallen. The ones in our own lives, but the ones we also never got to know. Because they serve for us also. In every war, in every conflict, they served for us. And we have to remember them in our hearts, and we have to remember their families too. Bruce mentioned that my family understood the cost of war, and we had an unusual family. Because during World War II, all of our parents were involved in the war effort. For my wife, her dad served in the Army in Europe. Her mom served at the Springfield, Massachusetts Armory. My mom served in the Office of War Information. My dad served in the Army in the Pacific. in places we now know were not easy places to be, the Aleutian Islands and Kwajalein, Leyte Gulf, and the last place he served, Okinawa, one of the bloodiest battles of all humankind's history. My dad was hit by a grenade his last day on Okinawa. He lost half of one leg. And when he came home, the war came home to our whole family. He was the one suffering the most. He suffered physically because he could never physically be the same again. He struggled with that. But he suffered emotionally as well. In ways we understand now, but in previous generations weren't understood, weren't embraced. I'll tell you that World War II generation, at least they came home to the acclaim they deserved. At least they came home to a hero's welcome. But for later generations, members of our military came home and did not get the respect they deserved. For those who came back from Vietnam, we all know well, too often they were shunned. They who fought for us, they were shunned. They were not the ones who made the decisions about war and peace. They went to serve their nation. So Memorial Day is a time to think carefully about how we actually show respect for those who have served, for their families, across every generation. Because we are not respecting our veterans if we're not also taking care of them and taking care of their families. We're not showing love and honor for their service if we leave them on their own. We created a Department of Veterans Services for the 210,000 veterans who live here in New York City, and also for their families. And I want to remind everyone, if you're feeling the spirit of this ceremony today, you can do something about it. If you own a business or you work in the public sector, you have anything to do with hiring, you know what you can do to say thank you? You can hire a veteran. That's what you can do to say thank you. You know what you can do that's equally important? You can hire the spouse of a veteran, because that helps that family too. And we are doing that in this city, in our government, but also with our private sector. We're reminding them every day, and we're providing the training to ensure that our veterans and their spouses can have the employment they deserve. And we're saying out loud that we've got a lot more to do. And this is a very, very patriotic and nonpartisan day. This is something that should unite us all, unite every one of us. We've got more to do for our Gold Star families, don't we? We've got more to do to help them. We've got more to do to help our veterans. We should not have a single homeless veteran anywhere. So, when we think about this day, let's be, in our own way, as good as the people we honor. Let's try in some small way to live up to their example. Our lives today are a lot more comfortable than those of our forebearers. And therefore, we have much more ability to reach a hand and help those in need. The next time you meet a veteran who's down on their luck, let's make sure we're there for them. Let's make sure we don't leave them behind. The next time you talk to a member of a Gold Star family who's having a rough time, let's make sure we don't forget them. Let's honor those who gave their lives. Let's honor every single man and woman who has served. Let's be there for them and their families, not just one day, but 365 days a year. Thank you. God bless you all.
It's quiet. don't, bro.